Annual shareholder meetings, Mr. Buffett, and still going strong. The thing about each meeting is that the world changes a bit between two meetings, and since the last meeting till now, the world has changed a lot. So what are your thoughts post this event?
Well, I love having it. I like seeing the people who really have invested with me face to face. And many years ago, 12 people attended, including 3 or 4 relatives of mine. And we want people to have a good time. We want them to learn more about Berkshire. We like the fact they meet each other. So it's always a time of celebration for us. Sometimes business isn't so good, but it's still a time of celebration.
Yeah, sometimes business is not so good, but and particularly at this time, sir, I speak to a lot of people, some of the wisest and the smartest people on the street, and they are concerned about the current global political environment and the global economic environment. Does that worry you, sir?
It really doesn't. This country, since 1776, it's moved forward in a way that no one thought was possible at that time. And we've had a civil war, we've had 2 world wars, we've had a Great Depression, we had flu epidemics, all kinds of things. And it always works out. I mean, I have no doubt about either the future of America or the future of the world.
But we live in a divided world. Does that not?
But we've lived in a divided world before. I mean, it was 150 years ago or so that this country had a civil war, and the North fought the South. So there's been, just in my lifetime, there's been huge conflicts around the world, and my dad was a Republican congressman, and he thought if the Democrats won that there would never be another election. I mean, all my life I've heard all these terrible things are going to happen, and here I am 86 and all kinds of good things have happened.
All right, so we'll be fine.
Absolutely.
Okay,
that is true.
At a time like this, world markets are at record highs. We are looking at a lot of markets hitting record highs. And the question really is, what is the market behavior telling us? Markets are typically ahead of the curve. Or do you think this time the markets are extending out on over-exuberance?
Well, the market really reflects people's opinions and emotions and eventually facts. My boss used to say, in the short run, the market is a voting machine. In the long run, it's a weighing machine. And I pay some attention to the market, but what I really pay attention to is the businesses that we own or could potentially own. And when we own shares of stock, we don't think of them as owning little stock certificates. We think of owning parts of businesses. And the truth is, you can buy a lot of very wonderful businesses, and you may pay out somewhat more for them than you would have a few years ago. But if you hold them, you're going to do fine.
Well, Mr. Buffett, I have to ask you this, because the U.S. bull market has entered its 9th year.
It's a long time.
Yeah, and the market cap to GDP is trading at 1.5 times. Does that not seem frothy to you?
Well, it would, if interest rates were, say, 6% for the long bond and 4% for short, then I would say that the valuation would look quite high. But against these interest rates, I would so much rather own stocks than bonds. And there's no question in my mind that American stocks will be selling for more 10 or 20 years from now. I have no idea whether they're going to be selling higher in 10 days or 10 months, but I never have had an idea. So I look at it and I say I can buy wonderful businesses at a fair price. I don't know whether the price will go up or down. I never have. But I do know over 10 years or 20 years that we'll do very well by owning those. So I don't pay attention to day-to-day markets or week-to-week markets, and I really never have had any ability to predict short-term market moves.
But if I were to ask you, to look at the crystal ball and see whether 2018, 2019 would turn out to be tougher years than what we've seen thus far, just given the timeline of this cycle, would that be a fair assessment, to be more cautious into those years?
Well, it's true. It's been a very long bull market. It was a very severe bear market before it entered into this. That was unusual that way. So it was unusually worrying what happened in 2008 and 2009. So it may take a long number of years to fully recover from that. But I wouldn't worry about it. If you buy into a good business, let's say you buy a private business, a very good one, you're not going to look at and see whether the market went up or down the next day. It really doesn't make any difference. What makes the difference is how the business does over a period of time. And it's nice. It's more fun to buy them during a bear market when their prices are way down.
Yes, true.
But if you try and jump in and out of markets, I don't think that you're going to do very well. I've never been able to do well.
Right. But sir, yesterday, when I was listening to you, the one aspect that came out very clearly is that you see a very favorable, benign interest rate environment. We've seen 3 rate hikes from the Fed, and the world is watching what the Fed does next, right? We are expecting 2 more, which takes the Fed funds rate by the end of this year to 1.25. Are you suggesting that the Fed is, either way, the cycle is shallow and slow? Are you suggesting that there would be a pause at 1.25, or we would see the Fed go up to 3%, but which is on an average historically also the lower end of the range?
I don't know what the Fed will do, but I have been amazed at how long low interest rates prevail, and particularly in Europe as well as the United States. And to some extent, we can't get too far away from Europe. So if Europe and Draghi would want to keep them very, very low, it makes it harder for Janet Yellen to open up some enormously wide gap. But I would say this, again, I don't know what the Federal Reserve is going to do, but I do know if I get offered a good business tomorrow at a sensible price, I don't care what she does. I mean, because I'm going to own it for 5 years or 10 years, and then people will be talking about a different Fed, and they'll be talking about this problem and that problem. If you
but this profit growth, sir, would come at a low interest rate level. So you've spoken about that.
Low interest rate levels mean you choose between putting your money out at very, very, very low rates, or you choose buying common equities, or you choose to buy real estate, or maybe you choose to buy a farm. And the lower interest rates are, the more you're tempted to buy other assets. And I prefer to buy businesses. I like to own 100% of them, but I also like to own 5% or 10% of a good business. And I do not want to buy bonds.
No, most definitely. So suffice to say that you don't see rates much higher from here, maybe moderately higher from here.
Well, certainly in the short term, but anything can happen over the longer term. Who would have dreamt in the United States that you'd have had rates this low for this long? I don't know anybody. And I know a lot of people that think they're pretty smart about things, and nobody called this one for this long.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to talk about India. I would fail in my duty if I didn't, coming all the way here.
And we've got a few extra minutes.
Okay. So you came to India in 2011. Why haven't you come back?
Well, I don't like to travel that much, to be perfectly honest. I've never been to Russia. I've never been, many places. I've only been south of the equator twice in my life. So I'm having a very, very, very good time here. And I will travel sometimes. And if you'll tell me a wonderful company in India that might be available for sale, I'll be there tomorrow. You don't have to worry about that. I will hop on a plane.
Well, we would love to host you in India, Mr. Buffett.
Well, I will say this, the time I was there, I never received better hospitality. I mean, it was really amazing. Every single person I met were extraordinarily hospitable.
Right. Since your last visit, we've had a new government under Prime Minister Narendra Modi and have had new reforms in demonetization, GST, bankruptcy code. What are your thoughts about India under the new government?
Well, I think a lot is happening that's good. And I think that the potential for India is incredible. When I met Bill Gates in 1991, we were just talking, and I said, if you could only hire from one university in the world, which would it be? And just like that, he said IIT. And then the most valuable person at Berkshire, is Ajit Jain, and
who's India's pride.
Well, and then he's got a brother in Italy, in India. I mean, and I keep trying to bring him over. I wrote his parents, Ajit's parents, and I said, if you've got another one over there, send him to me. I need him. I mean, it's astounding the number of brilliant people that I know from India. So I'd love to hire people. I would love to buy a business, but it has to be a big business to move the needle at Berkshire.
And I'm going to ask you about that. The big debate in the world and the big discussion point is really what will Mr. Buffett do with the cash on his books? So I was wondering, would India be able to draw some part of that cash?
Oh, sure it could. I mean, like I say, I will be there tomorrow. If you can tell me about a big business, a good business, and that it might be for sale to us.
Right. So after Israel, China, India could be the next country within emerging markets that you could.
India, I mean, logically, India should be right up at the top of the list. I mean, it's such a big market, and I'll just call up Ajit, and I'll ask him for a little background on whatever I'm going to do, and then I'll go right down to the airport and get on the plane.
Sir, I was wondering, you're such a big consumer investor, and I was just thinking in my head, but why hasn't Mr. Buffett invested in the India consumer story as yet, and the Indian consumption theme as yet? So that perhaps could be a big opportunity. Do you still see scope there?
In which one?
In the consumer story in India.
Well, the consumer, I mean, it's a lot of people, and there's a lot of buying power.
And the per capita is moving
it's going to go up. It's going to go up.
Yeah.
No, it's going to go up. And no, there's no question that if you look at the value of India as a business, just aggregate it all, it's going to be worth a lot more money 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And one problem we have is the business has to be available. I mean, we never do anything unfriendly.
Right.
So I need somebody who thinks, for one reason or the family reasons or whatever, that they would like us to be an owner. And if it's big and it's something I understand, I would love to buy it.
Yeah, I went through your acquisition of Iscar, and I went through your acquisition of PetroChina, and what I kind of gathered from there is that you could perhaps be so here's my question: Do you think that you could look at, out of the options that you have in India, maybe an investment like PetroChina, where you come in with about $400-500 million, and then you take back home $3.5-4 billion?
I'd love to do that again.
Yeah. Or acquire a complete business like you did with Iscar in 2015.
The latter is what I would prefer.
Okay.
That's what we're trying to do at Berkshire. That's true whether it's India or the United States or any place else.
I was given another option about allocating some part of your capital to the active fund managers in India who are outperforming the index.
That I won't do.
Okay,
I won't do that in the United States. I won't do that anyplace else.
Okay, because there are a lot of active fund managers who are massive fans of yours, and they were like, oh, it'd be great to manage money on Mr. Buffett's behalf.
I've had letters from a few of them.
Yeah, we were traveling actually with a couple of active fund managers. What about India's future place in the world, sir?
It's a huge, enormous market for one thing, but beyond that, you can't have 1 billion people not be important to this world, and you can't. I mean, and the better things develop in India, the better it is for the United States. That's not exclusive to India. I mean, I believe the same thing about other countries, but we as Americans should want the rest of the world to prosper, and the more the rest of the world prospers, eventually the more the United States prospers, and there's so much opportunity in the world, and there's so much brain power in India. I mean, it is not like you're dealing with some very, very, very smart people, and if you take somebody like Ajit, I always wonder what he would have done, for example, if he'd stayed in India. I guarantee he'd done something of large scope. So India's got a terrific future, and it took this country a long time to figure out certain things that worked and certain things that didn't work. I mean, every country goes through that, and it can get more complicated. More different religions there are, more different languages there are, all of that sort of thing. But you do know what works. The blueprint is out there. And India, your children are going to live better than you live, and your grandchildren are going to live better than your children live. And it's going to come at a pretty fast pace. Right.
So insurance and reinsurance is very close to your heart. Is that a theme that you would look at in India, because the reinsurance market is opening? Insurance, yes, you have 49% stake, but there's a lot of money coming in there.
Yeah. Well, we do some business there. Now, Ajit does that, so I don't really know the details that much of it. But again, I mean, it's a huge market, and certainly Ajit should understand very well. And people are always going to need insurance. Sometimes there have been restrictive laws in terms of the percentage we can own, and that's a disadvantage. I mean, we would like to own 100% of any business that we run, but you'll see us.
So India and the rest of the world is inquisitive to know about Mr. Jain's role in the future of Berkshire Hathaway. I have to just slip in that question as well.
Well, he is doing something he loves doing. He's absolutely indispensable to Berkshire. Insurance is the most important part of Berkshire, and he does an amazing number of things for us now. I've always said that if Ajit and I are both drowning and the shareholders could only save one of us, they should swim toward a jeet.
Okay. So, emerging market fund managers, face a dilemma which I want to put forward to you, and that is on when, to decide on when to sell a stock. When I read about your investment with Petrochan, I felt that you also face the same dilemma, because at 3.5 billion, you thought you could earn more. At any given point in time, there'll be growth in those companies. There'll be growth visibility of 5 to 10 years, irrespective of valuation. So what's a good indicator of when to sell in an emerging market?
If you know the business well, and you think the business has a wonderful future, it's better to be very slow about selling. I mean, if you're in a wonderful business, if you're in a wonderful marriage, you don't want to think too much about changing partners. There's a lot to be said if you understand company A, because you've been with it a long time and you know it a lot better than company B or C. You don't want to sell company A just because you're going to think it's going to go down a little bit and you'll buy it back cheaper. 'Cause maybe that works 3 times out of 4, but the 4th time you miss a long ride. And I want a pretty compelling reason to move from one business to another. So I would be slow to sell, very slow to sell a very good business. I wouldn't sell it just because it went up some.
So I'll take just 2 more questions.
Sure.
One is, reflecting back at your life and your experience, what would Warren Buffett, the investor today, say to Warren Buffett, the investor in 1950, and what does he hope to hear back from him?
Well, it was easier to invest in 1950. There was less competition. In the United States, but everywhere in the world. So I wasn't competing against as many people. And it's always nice not to have very many competitors. And believe it or not, even in 1950, mentally and psychologically, to some extent, the United States was still coming out of the Great Depression. I mean, people's ideas had been formed by that. So they were looking at things with a pessimistic eye. In fact, a lot of people thought we'd have a big depression after World War II ended. And I didn't feel that way, so I had an advantage. But that doesn't exist now. Now I'm competing against a great many smart people who learned a lot and study what we do and who are optimistic about the country as well. So it's a tougher game now. On the other hand, I'd love to do it all over again.
That's great, sir. That's great to hear. Finally, sir, the pledge to give away your wealth.
Pardon me?
The pledge to give away your wealth.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Of course, I saw your documentary. I saw how Miss Susan Thompson was very passionate about the cause and to give back to society. There are a lot of rich people out there, Mr. Buffett, who have the will, who have the intent to give money.
Right.
But somewhere they fall short of taking the final plunge. What would be your message to them?
Well, my message to them, if they found some way to take it with them, I wish they'd tell me the secret, but they're going to have to do something with it. And the truth is, if you're very rich, the world has probably been pretty good to you. And you've had all kinds of things you've had whatever you wanted pretty much in life that money can buy. And if you've had, and you wouldn't have had it except for the fact there are millions and billions of people in this world. And 98% of them or 99% have not been as lucky as you. And they will get diseases that you'll avoid because you can afford better health care and all kinds of things. And if you've had everything you want in life and you have a lot of surplus left over, why not help out the people that have helped you? I mean, you could have gotten you could have had different luck when you were born. I call it the ovarian lottery, basically. And it just seems crazy to me not to share it with people who haven't had as good luck.
Well, I'll take that message, Mr. Buffett. Thanks so very much
Thank you.
for taking out the time.
A lot of fun.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNow Live. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.